Carrie, are you sure you want to swap information with your deceased sister? Once the swap is successful, every trace of you in this world will vanish, and you will no longer exist. Even in the noisy venue, the staff handling the process could hear the woman on the phone reply with an exceptionally firm tone. I'm sure. Please handle it as soon as possible. With the woman's response, the staff worked on the computer. The swap process would take about 15 days, and someone would contact her when it was done. After hanging up, Carrie walked towards the lounge. Today was the day David won his award. The organizers knew about their relationship, so they specially brought her backstage to wait for a bit. But before she could open the door, Carrie heard a woman inside, begging sporadically. The light in Carrie's eyes seemed to extinguish instantly. She suppressed her trembling hands and called David on her phone. Inside, a familiar ringtone quickly played, followed by David's voice coming through the door and the phone simultaneously. Honey, are you getting impatient? I'll come to find you right after I accept the award. Take your time. Carrie quietly listened to him, then said softly after a while, I'm waiting for you. Her voice was light, as if it could drift away in the next second. Before David could say more, she hung up first. Meanwhile, the lounge was filled with quite a commotion again, the intimate sounds continuously piercing into Carrie's ears like a silent sharp knife, cutting through her heart. Carrie didn't feel like listening any longer. She steadied herself, stubbornly straightened her back, and walked to a quiet corner. When she was alone, she let her tears fall freely. She recalled the confusion and helplessness when she first discovered David's affair. No one would have guessed that someone who cherished her would spend nights away in another woman's home, lost in sweet oblivion. She couldn't understand how someone could love two people simultaneously. Seamless transition was an understatement. Her dad was like that before, and now David is too. The vows of the past, strong and steadfast, ended up being as fleeting as bubbles, disappearing without a trace. In a daze, she thought back to the painful childhood days. As far back as she could remember, she and her sister endured their parents' endless arguments. Harsh words became routine. What frightened Carrie the most was, sometimes, the fights would get so intense they'd turn physical, and even drag her and her sister into it. The misfortunes of her childhood made Carrie doubt love. She was sure nobody would love her passionately, or stay with her forever. But David's appearance changed everything. He would protect her from her parents' anger and fight back fiercely when she got bullied. Even when she was all alone later, David never gave up on her. Even at his peak fame, David ignored his company's objections and boldly declared their relationship to the world, making others envy their love. He became her world, showering her with all his affections. He remembered her birthday and every anniversary, bringing endless romance. He wouldn't let her feel wronged. At their wedding, his eyes were filled with true love. He burst into her life like a brave, passionate little conqueror, piercing through the endless darkness and bringing a glimmer of light. But now, someone told her that David secretly kept another woman for 3 years. How many 3 years can a relationship endure anyway? Back then, David's love felt real, but now, his betrayal stung deeply. If the mental anguish was distressing, what about the pain in her heart? She didn't dare to ponder. Just as she calmed her emotions, David appeared smiling, with his trophy in hand. Honey, why are you crying? Did someone bully you? His face was full of concern, gently wiping her tears, then pulling her into his arms to comfort her softly. People bustled around them, and many noticed them hugging tightly, cheering and exclaiming that this must be what happiness looks like. But in Carrie's heart, she wanted to ask herself, is this really the happiness I want? Despite David's genuine concern, Carrie could smell a scent on him that wasn't his. What's more, beneath his open collar were marks that weren't from her, glaringly obvious. Did you spray perfume? She was sensitive to scents, so she'd never used any of the perfume David gifted her over the years. David sniffed his shirt, then looked at Carrie with a hint of panic in his eyes, trying to explain. The ceremony was a big deal, so the stylist put some on me. If it bothers you, I'll change clothes now. Carrie didn't care to hear his excuses. She just stared fixedly at the red mark on David's chest, so brazenly exposed before her, as if he didn't care who saw it. She felt as if she'd fallen into an icy pit, her blood frozen, and the hope in her eyes fading away. In that moment, she found the person in front of her eerily unfamiliar, as if she never really knew him at all. She could overlook David's secrets, but what hurt her most was, this was the most insignificant award he'd ever won. Why was this one so important to him? Was it because she was there? Because it was her favorite scent? Or was he just trying to spite her intentionally? Noticing her change of mood, David unwittingly tugged at his shirt, completely covering the shame. Then he offered her the trophy, trying to divert her attention. "Honey, this honor belongs to you. You've worked so hard. Once I'm less busy, I'll stay home with you, okay?" His words were filled with remorse, giving Carrie no chance to refuse. Carrie glanced at the words on the trophy, Best Actor. Yeah, after 9 years together, David's acting had been top-notch. From the moment she learned the truth till now, a whole month had passed. She had considered her issues, and thought if David would turn back, she'd choose to forgive him. But she never expected he'd be bold enough to hook up in the lounge, right after getting an award. So, when she found out David had deceived her, Carrie decided to swap information with her deceased sister, and escape to a place he couldn't find her, leaving him forever. There was a time when she couldn't get enough of him. Now he's the one she hates the most. All her fantasies about David would vanish like ghosts in 15 days. From now on, she vowed they'd never meet again. The perfume made Carrie dizzy. Pulling away from his embrace, she spoke with exhaustion. "David, I'm a bit tired. Let's go home." "Sweetheart, it's my fault. I shouldn't have kept you waiting so late," said David. "Let's go home now. I'll cook for you, okay?" Seeing how worn out she seemed, David didn't dare delay. He quickly asked his assistant for the car keys and drove Carrie home. It had been a long time since they had moments like this. Not since David became famous. Carrie leaned against the window, her eyes heavy. She drifted into sleep. After some time, she heard a ding. Thinking it was her phone, she was about to open her eyes. But then she heard a familiar female voice. "David, why did you take my clothes?" The voice wasn't loud, but it was distinct in the cramped space. She opened her eyes slightly, catching David quickly switching off his phone through the reflection in the window. The car fell silent again. Carrie pretended to sleep, yet felt a burning gaze fixed on her. After a while the car stopped. A breeze blew. When she opened her eyes again, the driver's seat was empty. David was nowhere to be seen. With a ding, a message popped up on David's phone. It was from someone named Baby, showing a picture followed by a message. Carrie could see the words clearly. "David, when are you coming for me? If not, I'll just step out without clothes." She turned away, trying not to think about what she saw. But these words kept flashing in her mind. The pain was overwhelming, suffocating her. Hugging herself tightly, Carrie leaned against the window, looking helpless and forlorn. When David returned, seeing her like this, his eyes softened with affection. He approached and hugged her gently, whispering, "I'm sorry, honey. It's my fault for leaving you alone in the car. I saw a convenience store and thought I'd get you something to eat. Please don't cry. It breaks my heart to see you like this." Carrie raised her hand to her face and realized she had been crying. She turned to find the truth in David's eyes, but everything was blurred, just like their 9-year relationship, messy and unclear. David took out the snacks he had bought, laying them before her. They were familiar to Carrie, peanut brittle, her favorite, yet forbidden, as she was allergic. When they first got together, someone swapped her snacks with it out of jealousy, leading to an allergic shock and a hospital rush. She was told David prayed outside for the whole duration. She was unconscious. Back then, he was entirely devoted to her. Now, ironically, it was he who forgot her allergies. While she was lost in thought, David opened the pack, offering a piece of peanut brittle to her lips. "Honey, have a snack. We're almost home. I'll make you dinner," he said. Carrie didn't respond, just took the peanut brittle and stared at it, not moving. Seeing her unmoved, David thought she disliked it, caressing her face lovingly. "Sweetheart, you loved peanut brittle, right? Why aren't you eating? Do you want hubby's cooking instead?" She shook her head, smiling faintly, but her smile couldn't hide the deep sadness in her eyes. "Did you forget I'm allergic to peanut brittle?" Her light words plunged the car into a cold silence. Awkwardly frozen, David apologized. "Honey, I'm sorry. I've been so busy, I forgot such an important thing. I'll go and get you something else. A hint of bitterness flashed through Carrie's eyes but quickly faded. She quietly replied, no need, let's just go home. However, David didn't listen, running out with his phone, only returning after some time. On the way home, Carrie leaned wearily against her seat, unable to shake off her sadness. The ache and anguish tormented her. This feeling lingered even when they got home. David went to cook, while Carrie sat in a daze on the couch. Her phone buzzed, and a message from Candy popped up. Carrie, do you believe I can have David with just a snap of my fingers? Faced with Candy's taunt, Carrie turned off her phone expressionlessly. When she looked up, she saw David checking his phone with a subtle smile. The next moment he pushed open the door. His apologetic voice coincided with a message alert. Darling, I'm sorry. I suddenly have a commercial shoot to do, so I can't cook. I'll have something sent over. He untied his apron, kissed her forehead softly, and left without looking back. Carrie stared at the door blankly for a long time, before getting up to follow him. She watched David's figure disappear at the villa gate, and then he vanished from sight. Just when Carrie was at her wit's end, Candy sent a text with 2 simple words that felt like a dagger to her heart: new home. It was the place David had promised her, saying he'd move in after retiring. But now, Candy had beaten her to it and taken over her home. When Carrie arrived and stood outside, she heard David's deep voice from inside. You're so enchanting, little minx, who taught you that? His voice intertwined with Candy's, echoing bits and pieces into her ears. David, ease up, I can hardly eat. But instead of slowing down, David picked up the pace. You'll eat it even if you can't. I want to see if you'll burst. Carrie wasn't sure how long she stayed there, but eventually David slowed down, catching his breath against Candy's shoulder. Don't come here looking for me. What if someone finds out? Candy pouted playfully, whispering, they won't, David. It's so secluded here. No one's gonna catch us. It's your wife I'd worry about. Mentioning Carrie riled David up again. Your trouble, he replied, his breath hot against Candy's face, leaving her weak, collapsing into him and whispering for mercy. Carrie held her mouth tightly, tears already streaming down, but she dared not make a sound. She stayed calm for a long time, but a deep ache swept through her, sinking into her bones and pounding her senses. She once thought David forgetting her peanut allergy was trivial, but now, witnessing this scene, a fresh wound pierced her heart, leaving her paralyzed and unsure what to do. An indescribable bitterness rose from her heart, rushing to her throat and suffocating her. Carrie wasn't sure how she made it home, but every time she recalled David's words and gifts, something pricked her chest, leaving her gasping. Looking around at everything he had brought into their home, she decided that when she left, she'd vanish from David's world without a trace, leaving no memories for him. When David returned and saw the bags by the door, panic spread across his face. He rushed up to Carrie, holding her tight. She gave him one simple answer. There's too much at home. I just want to store some stuff elsewhere since there'll be more in the future, right? David let out a small sigh of relief. His tone sincere, he said, honey, you'd never leave me, would you? As he spoke, his voice wavered, as if he really loved her. But to Carrie, who knew what he'd done, his words felt empty. She pushed David slightly away, and asked with a bitter hint, David, do you remember what you promised me? Her face pale, she repeated, you said you'd love me forever, through life and death, never changing. If you mess up, I'd leave, wouldn't I? David didn't know what happened, but seeing her pale face scared him, like losing her was a moment away. Honey, don't say such things. I won't let you leave. We'll be together forever, he pleaded. His shaking hands betrayed his anxiety. If not for the sight of a woman's underwear peeking from his suit pocket, Carrie might have believed his act. Still, she pretended not to notice, replying, all right, together forever. Relieved, David stayed beside her, helping clean up. Maybe the old David loved her, but now Carrie knew they could never go back. The word forever, though close, was beyond her reach. The next morning, David was gone, leaving a note saying he had something to do, and would send someone to take her to try on wedding dresses. After 9 years together, married for 5, David had given her a grand wedding, but never fulfilled her dream of a wedding photo shoot. Carrie calmly moved the packed bags downstairs to the trash, devoid of the joy a wedding day should bring. Only when David's calls grew persistent did she head to the bridal store. There, the staff presented the dress David chose, though he was nowhere in sight. She waited, then called his assistant. When David first started, he had no staff. She placed someone she trusted by his side, making him ecstatic and promising better success with their help. When she finally reached the assistant, he mumbled, "Sorry, Ning. David's shooting an ad and can't leave right now." She hung up, and eventually David arrived. "Sorry, honey. I had a shoot to reshoot," he said, genuinely grasping her hand, kissing it. "I'll let you punish me when we get home. I promise it won't happen again." Many knew David, but it was a first seeing him so doting. David genuinely looked like a man afraid of his wife, leaving others commenting, "He spoils her so much. He's so kind." He announced their relationship at his peak, breaking countless hearts. "If someone ever did that for me, I'd be over the moon. When am I going to meet such a great guy?" Right now, among everyone here, only Carrie knows that David lied to her again. And so did the assistant who also betrayed her. The two people she trusted most had somehow teamed up to hurt her. The sales clerk's blunt words made David blush, but he didn't stop them. He just pushed Carrie towards the wedding dresses, saying, "Honey, try it on. I can't wait to see you in it." Just as she took the dress, the sound of heels echoed from the entrance. Then a woman in a tight black dress strolled in, standing right in front of David, removing her sunglasses. "I thought you looked familiar." "It's David," Candy greeted warmly, but her eyes slid towards Carrie with a bit of disdain. Was Candy here to try on wedding dresses too? In front of all those people, David felt awkward saying no. So he took her hand and held it tightly. Carrie saw it all, and felt a pang of pain in her heart. "Honey, why don't you try on the dress again? I'll wait for you here." David pulled her close by the shoulders, but his gaze lingered on Candy. Once she was in the changing room, Carrie stood in front of the mirror, her face pale. When she opened her mouth, she could taste blood. She never put on the dress he chose with care. Why take wedding photos when she was leaving? For years, it had been a regret she'd carry. She waited for David outside the men's changing room, for what felt like forever. When she came to, she was inside. In a corner, a man and a woman were wrapped around each other. She sank to the ground, covering her mouth, her eyes wandering helplessly until they met Candy's. "David." The words slipped out as she pressed herself against his chest. Carrie, not far away, knew she should leave, but felt as if chained down, unable to move. Tears fell as she bit her lip hard, drawing blood. After a while, during a moment of rest, Carrie overheard Candy telling David pitifully, "I want that wedding dress you picked. Can you give it to me, please?" "But I promised it to Carrie." "You." Before he could finish, Candy interrupted, "I really want it. If you don't give it to me, I'll get rid of the baby." "A baby? They had a baby?" Carrie couldn't wrap her mind around what she was hearing. She shut her eyes, the despair flooding in and drowning her sanity. They had wanted a child too. She loved kids. David, caving under the pressure, said, "All right, whatever Carrie had, you'll have two if not more." Even though she had seen it all, the constant blows kept replaying past pains in her mind. Gaining some sense back, she took out her phone, snapped a picture, and ran from the bridal shop. She couldn't bear to watch anymore, too afraid she'd sink too deep to escape. Carrie had a long dream and woke up feeling drained. Her slight movement startled David awake. "Honey, you're awake. I'll get the doctor." His limbs were stiff from leaning forward too long, almost making him fall, but joy was clear on his face. After the doctor left, David hugged her tightly. "Why didn't you tell me you were sick? When the nurse called, I was so scared." Scared? Funny that he could feel fear. Carrie chuckled. If she disappeared forever, would he plunge into despair? Who would he be with then? His work set aside, David stayed at the hospital, attending to every need like a doting partner, stirring jealousy among the nurses. Everyone gushed over how caring he was. "You haven't seen anything. The family of patient in bed 22? He even follows her to the bathroom." Someone sighed. "I'm so envious. If I find a guy like that, I'd marry him without a second thought. Having money is great, isn't it? We're stuck here watching them flaunt their love," another groaned. Remarks of David from others left Carrie cold, where once they would have delighted her. Now everything had changed. She smirked bitterly. When David returned, she didn't say a word. This carried on into the night, Carrie's silence driving him frantic. Honey, what's wrong? Did I do something? Please say something. His worry was palpable, a rare sight, sweating, on the verge of tears. Carrie glanced outside. Dark clouds gathered. She met his eyes and said flatly, I'm tired. I want to sleep. Okay, I'll stay with you. She closed her eyes, trying not to think of all that had happened. Through the haze, she caught Candy's voice from outside, followed by David's low, angry murmur. Didn't I tell you not to come here? Candy coddled, moving closer to David. You haven't come to see me in ages. Can I miss you? While saying this, she tugged him into the room, where the spare bed and leather sofa waited. Without a thought, she pushed him onto the sofa. David never thought she'd be so bold, pulling this stunt in front of Carrie. Who told you to come here and tempt me? He whispered. His gravelly voice hinted he'd be shouting, if he wasn't afraid of waking Carrie up. David, do you really not want me? Candy asked, her expression seductive. Outside, rain pounded the window with large, splattering drops. The noise echoed in Carrie's ears, jarring her nerves. Nestled in bed, she listened to everything. Tears rolled silently down her face, wetting the pillow, draining her last ounce of strength. Almost there, she thought. 2 more days and she'd be gone. She wiped her eyes, but couldn't hide the scars in her heart. She just realized love could be faked. That it's possible to love 2 people at once. That in the end love depends on one's conscience. David, I bore all your vows. I only ask that in our next life, we never meet. Since recovering from a major illness, Carrie found it hard to muster interest in anything. Noticing her apathy, David accepted an invitation to a class reunion, hoping to lift her spirits and reminisce about high school days. On the reunion day, Carrie wore her old school uniform. The moment she glanced down, she saw the big letters where her heart was. Carrie, I, David, will love you forever. What once made her heart race now left her gaze calm and devoid of the blush and excitement of yesterdays. David complimented her, saying she looked just like she did in high school, missing the paleness of her face entirely. As they passed each other, his heart ached, leaving him only the view of Carrie's retreating figure. He felt strange seeing Carrie there. In his memories, no matter how upset she got, she'd never go silent or avoid touching him. His mind was tangled in confusion. The more he struggled, the more it hurt. He feared that Carrie had found out everything he'd done. He dreaded that she might leave him. Isn't it starting? Why aren't we going? Carrie suddenly paused to wait for him, easing his worried heart. Thank God. Everything's fine. Carrie just forgot to wait for me. That's it. He reassured himself. When they pulled up at the school, the grounds were already filled with people. Fearing she might get jostled, David held her protectively by her shoulder till they reached their classroom. Back in the day, they were the talk of the town, their antics raising a storm. Now their arrival stirred playful teasing from classmates. Hey, it's our rebel and the class belle. Still so in love after all these years? I remember Carrie's appendicitis. David skipped class to rush her to the hospital. Got into trouble for that one. Their friends chimed in with high school stories, but Carrie only felt a headache. Why couldn't people let the past go? Claiming she felt unwell, she made her escape, David following closely. As soon as they stepped outside, David's phone buzzed. A glance, a quick hang up, but the messages kept pouring in, relentless. Honey, there's an urgent matter with our partners. He looked apologetic, not shifty or guilty. Can you hang around here for a while? I'll be back to pick you up soon, he assured. Numb to the pain, Carrie merely nodded at him to go. After he left, Candy's texts popped up. Aren't you curious what he's doing? Ignoring the rest, Carrie followed David through twists and turns, eventually reaching their old shared classroom. Peeking inside, she saw David, eyes red, pinning Candy down. She stood in shock outside the door, unable to act. I said I'd be with Carrie today. Why are you causing trouble here? David barked, unnerving Candy into tears as she nestled into his arms. Without reading further, Carrie felt her heart crushed into pieces, relentless pain trailing her like a phantom. Her eyes could conjure no more tears. The torment was a merciless whip flaying her spirit. Just as she intended to leave, her phone buzzed with Candy's message. Can't take it anymore? I've slept with your husband, and he said he loves me. Don't think you're special. Just give up and take the divorce option. If you wait till I have the baby, it'll only get uglier for you. I have to be honest, he tells me you aren't good enough, that's on you. Remember those jewels and the wedding gown? With just a little sweet talk, they're mine. Bet you didn't know that. David promised me anniversaries and birthdays matching yours. He gives me everything, often better than you get. Oh, and remember the car accident on your first scan day? I left something for you by the sycamore where David proposed. If you don't check it out, you might miss the truth. Carrie didn't reply. She just saved all the messages, and the video clip Candy sent without opening it. Packaged it all together. After doing all that, Carrie, filled with questions, went to the tree by memory. In their 3rd year of marriage, she and David had a baby. He was over the moon, even considering giving up his career to stay home and help her. He knew she didn't want kids, so he didn't push her after they got married, just waited naturally for their little one. Carrie was super sensitive and could tell how much it meant to him, but she didn't agree to his request. She just smiled and said she had it covered. Maybe David did so well over the years that she didn't have any doubts. So when she found out David told Candy about her prenatal appointments, and even let her set up the car crash to cause Carrie's miscarriage, everything went blank. It was like her breath just stopped. The day they lost the baby, she cried her heart out, regretting not protecting him better. Later, she found out she couldn't get pregnant again, which made her collapse in the hospital, unconscious for days. David blamed himself too, wondering why he didn't fulfill his duty as a husband. But he hid his guilt, throwing himself into work. Carrie couldn't believe her eyes, going through the reports and screenshots over and over, trying to find something to overturn her conclusion. But there was nothing. The cold, harsh truth was staring right at her. The scale had been tipping all along, crashing down on Candy's side. He had used his acting skills to fool Carrie for years. He did love her, felt guilty, and yes, he betrayed her. The relationship they nurtured was a giant lie, an unforgettable deceit. A hint of mockery flashed in Carrie's eyes, quickly replaced by overwhelming hatred. She went home first and put together the chat records Candy had sent, the truth from 3 years ago, and the divorce papers, placing them in the birthday gift she planned for David. At the same time, the phone rang. Carrie, the exchange is complete. You'll be living as Clara now. Wish you happiness. As soon as the call ended, David called on video. Honey, what are you doing? They said you were already back when I came. She smiled softly, dodging the question. Finished up with the collaborators? I'm fine. David was visibly nervous, adding a bit of guilt. Not yet. I'll be going back soon. Carrie nodded gently, just reminding him. I prepared a birthday gift for you. Make sure to open it when you get home. He said okay while frequently glancing back at a figure in the bathroom. Carrie didn't linger, telling him to rest up after work. Without letting David speak further, she hung up without hesitation, knowing what he was likely doing. She wondered how he'd react when he couldn't find her tomorrow. Bright and early, Carrie took the little luggage she had and headed to the airport. Plenty of people were saying goodbye, but no one was worth staying for. On the plane, she drifted into sleep, recalling the first time she met David. He was waving, stepping back, saying Carrie goodbye forever. After David hung up, he rushed to the bathroom, pulling Candy into his arms. She playfully teased, couldn't wait, huh David? What if your wife saw us? Mentioning Carrie made David frown, a flash of displeasure in his eyes. I told you, don't let me hear you say Carrie's name. He grasped Candy's chin, kissed her intensely, filled with a mysterious unease that made her wince but not dare to pull away. From Carrie's tone earlier, he sensed her unhappiness, assuming she was just sulking, as if all she needed was a little coddling. He shut the thought down quickly though, having someone else waiting for him. David stayed with Candy all night, finally remembering his turned-off phone before heading home. He was trying to avoid countless messages from Carrie, but when he did turn it on, there was nothing. No avalanche of texts, just eerie calm. Thinking back to last night, he was instantly nervous. Fear took root, and he acted like a madman, jumping out of the car before it stopped and racing home. His thoughts were a blur, just a tight knot in his chest and a jumping eyelid. He couldn't bring himself to slow down, fearing Carrie would vanish. He kept telling himself she was just feeling down and busy, but the empty bedroom wiped the color from his face. "Honey, I'm back," he called, turning the whole house inside out without a single answer. David froze, mind racing through every possibility. In his daze, he imagined Carrie there, smiling, waving goodbye. How could it be? He thought, she said yesterday she'd celebrate my birthday and had a gift for me. Yes, a gift. Carrie must be joking. This had to be a joke. He hurried to grab the gift box but hesitated, revealing his own self-doubt. The first thing he saw inside was countless solo photos. Photos that used to feature both him and Carrie, now torn in two, leaving just him. He picked up the first one, taken when they first got together with friends. They were young back then, full of love in their eyes. The second one was from a high school trip, taken at a museum entrance. That day, Carrie saw the less than 3-week-old embryo and couldn't help but tear up. David hugged her, comforting her. But someone snapped a picture and ridiculed him, saying he'd become a wife-dominated husband. The third picture was from their graduation. David insisted on standing behind Carrie and got into a fight over it, ending up with a bleeding forehead, looking a bit pitiful. The fourth photo was from his first movie shoot, with Carrie standing nearby holding flowers, waiting for him. Their love made others envious. The fifth, sixth, countless photos followed. David had long lost count of how long it had been since he and Carrie took a photo together. Since Candy came into his life, he'd been spending less and less time at home. His mind was no longer on Carrie, and their connection slowly faded. As David moved the photos aside to keep looking, he found a paper document completely intact underneath. What could it be? Even though he didn't dare to look, he already had an answer in his heart. With trembling hands, he moved the last few photos covering the document, and the big words at the top made his heart skip a beat. He couldn't hold anything else, and everything fell to the floor in a scattered mess. It was a divorce agreement. His Carrie wanted a divorce. David shakily took the divorce papers from the gift box and tore them into pieces. He couldn't understand why things were getting out of hand. Was it? The surprise left in the gift box confirmed David's suspicions. Carrie had taken away all their beautiful memories, leaving him only a phone. It was full of text messages between her and Candy, including the disgusting pictures and videos Candy used to taunt her. What David regretted the most was the fact that Carrie had discovered the truth about the miscarriage. David felt his head pounding, and his legs gave way, collapsing to the ground. He only knew that he didn't want to part with Carrie, much less divorce her. He couldn't lose her. He picked up his phone to call his assistant, hoping to ask if Carrie had contacted her recently, but the answer he got was disappointing. Ever since she inquired about his whereabouts at the bridal store, they hadn't been in touch. David suddenly remembered the situation that day. He had planned to finish up early to spend time with Carrie, but Candy showed up and used a lame excuse to lure him away. The commercial shoot was done, and he had someone inform his assistant. If she called, they should cover for him. But the assistant's message differed, leading to a slip that caused Carrie's suspicions. His assistant's pale explanations echoed in his ears. "Carrie, we still have another commercial to shoot. David can't come right now, I'm sorry." His own excuses replayed in his mind like a nightmare. Had Carrie known he was cheating all along? And that's why she didn't get angry when their stories didn't match? David couldn't even imagine. After dialing another number, he no longer dared to ask. The person on the other end answered with 3 consecutive hello before hanging up, assuming it was a scam. But he wasn't willing to give up. He contacted everyone he could think of, asking if they knew where Carrie was. But he was wrong. If Carrie had really wanted to leave, why would she let others know her whereabouts and make it easy for him to find her? David slumped on the floor, hitting himself hard with his fists. How had he not realized Carrie could read people so well? Everything he had concealed only convinced her more to leave. Finally, he remembered another person he might contact. After considerable effort, he reached them, only to receive news of Carrie's death. "David, ma'am has passed away. Please accept our condolences." Hearing this was like a double blow to David. Without thinking, he denied it. "No, that can't be right. They must be mistaken. Carrie took all her luggage. How could she be dead? She must be hiding somewhere, waiting for him to find her and make amends." She had once told him that even if she was angry, she'd never ignore him outright. Even if she decided to divorce, she wouldn't just disappear without a trace. But then he remembered Carrie had learned everything, the truth about what he'd done over the years. On their wedding day, she'd sworn in front of everyone that if he betrayed her, they would never meet again, in this life or the next. But wasn't he just making a mistake that many men do? What did he do wrong exactly? How could Carrie be so unforgiving, not even willing to accept that? Feeling utterly defeated on the floor, David was overwhelmed by waves of dull pain ripping through his heart. As each second ticked by, it felt as if a knife were slicing through him, leaving him bloody and battered. In a moment of reflection, he remembered the cryptic words Carrie said that day. That was the day when her eyes filled with nothing but hopelessness. So, she'd been planning to leave him all this time. She'd been waiting for his change of heart, waiting for her resolve to finally leave. He recalled all his grand promises, and the vow saying he'd let her go if he ever betrayed her. Receiving a new message on his phone shook him from his thoughts. It was Candy. Linking everything that happened, David blamed it all on Candy. Rage boiled within him. He grabbed his car keys and headed out to Candy's place. On the drive over, scenes of his time with Carrie flashed before him, piercing his heart with excruciating pain. Tears streamed uncontrollably, soaking his shirt with dark wet patches. He'd been so cautious, hiding the affair with all his wit, but he never imagined Candy would be so bold as to confront Carrie directly. From the start, he'd told Candy many times Carrie was off limits. She wasn't allowed to mention her or cause trouble. Had he not indulged her time and again, where would Candy get the nerve to treat Carrie like that? By the time David arrived, Candy was already there waiting. He had no clue what today meant for Candy, but he lost Carrie, and he believed it was all Candy's fault. Candy had no idea that Carrie was gone. She just saw David and her smile grew even wider. She knew that David would side with her again and give up on Carrie. David. She approached him with that girlish tone, clinging to his arm. Why are you so? Before she could finish her sentence, David grabbed her by the neck and slammed her into the wall. His strength was shocking. He was so angry that he didn't realize how determined he was to hurt her. David seemed like a madman, his mind repeating one thing. If Candy hadn't provoked Carrie, Carrie wouldn't have left him. Since Carrie was gone, Candy couldn't stay either. David. As she was about to suffocate, David finally let go of her. He wasn't sparing her because there was hope, but because he wanted to settle things. Things that should have been dealt with when she sent messages to Carrie. David sat on the couch, tossing his phone in front of her. Who gave you the guts to tell her about us? Candy couldn't bear the feeling of coming back to life, and didn't want to experience it again. She lay on the ground, coughing uncontrollably and gulping in the fresh air like it was life itself. David watched her, eyes full of impatience. Candy, I'll ask you again. Who put you up to provoking Carrie? Answer me. He was nothing like the man who used to be delighted by her coquettishness. Candy picked up the phone trembling when she saw the message contents. David, you have to believe me. She crawled to him, clung to his pant leg, and desperately pleaded, I'm having your child. Why worry about Carrie? We'd be a perfect family. She should have left a long time ago, right? She looked up, only to find his gaze as sharp as a knife, full of murderous intent that he couldn't hide. Realizing she said the wrong thing, and tried to explain using the baby. David, I'm pregnant with your child. Please, for the baby's sake, forgive me just this once. Just once. David was done with her. Only endless disappointment remained. Candy, I warned you the first time. Don't let Carrie find out you exist. You promised you'd be quiet. A kept woman who wouldn't stir trouble. Why do you keep hurting her? Carrie left me now. Are you happy? Hearing the last line finally sank in for Candy. It was because Carrie left that David was furious. Her face turned pale as she realized she was cold from head to toe. Now that Carrie was gone, didn't that mean? Candy played the pity card, kneeling and putting David's hand on her belly, hoping to ignite any remaining affection. David, feel our baby. He just kicked. She never intended for things to get this far. Without the child, she would have remained that quiet kept woman, avoided by everyone. I just didn't want the baby to be fatherless, even if you'd be with him. People would call him a bastard. Candy knew what she'd been through, and thought she wasn't wrong. She didn't want her unborn child to suffer as she had. So you went after Carrie, right? David's anger made her shiver. She instinctively protected her belly, bowing repeatedly. David, it's my fault. I didn't keep my word. Seeing David unmoved, Candy resorted to hitting her own face. In the silent night, the slaps were piercing. One after the other landed, and she became numb to the pain, focused only on her resolve. David, I'm begging you. Forgive me one last time, for the child's sake, please. Candy never thought she'd cry so much one day. When that day came, all she could do was beg. Beg David to spare her, spare the child. But she forgot. She forgot who she was and David's warnings, repeatedly missing her chances for forgiveness. By now it was impossible. David had made up his mind by the time he drove over. This child shouldn't exist. Seeing no response, Candy collapsed, tears dried up. David bent down, lifting her chin to meet his eyes, suddenly seeing her in a new repulsive light. The person he once wanted to stand against the world with disgusted him now. Candy, get the abortion tomorrow. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Even though she guessed this, hearing him say it broke her heart again. Her pitiful look was touching to anyone but him. Unfortunately, times had changed. No matter how she feigned pity, no one would be swayed now. No, David, no. This is our hard-earned baby. I can't. David sneered cruelly. It's not up to you. He had given Candy chances before, even warned her not to create trouble. But what did she do? She kept making mistakes, ultimately driving Carrie away. If you don't seize the opportunity now, it'll never come again. Candy, I'll pick you up for the hospital tomorrow. Seeing that David had no intention of forgiving her, Candy stood up, holding her belly, with nothing but endless mockery in her eyes. David, you were the one who approached me first, saying you wanted to keep me. For 3 years, I listened to you, did whatever you wanted. Just because Carrie left, you're ditching me? Is all of this my fault? Aren't you to blame too? If you hadn't indulged me, promised me whatever I wanted, maybe things wouldn't be like this now. Carrie's leaving ultimately comes down to her fate. She wasn't meant to stay. David's face suddenly darkened when he heard that, grabbing Candy's wrist and pulling her toward him. Say that again. What did Carrie do wrong? Candy froze, scared by his outburst. She knew if she kept talking, it might end badly for her. He usually kept his cool, hardly ever lost his temper. But now he was visibly furious, his expression tight, filling the room with tension. If he wasn't truly angry, he wouldn't be this upset. I suggest you don't push your luck. With that, David threw down those words and turned to leave without looking back. After the room quieted down, Candy felt a wave of fear. If she had truly pushed him to anger, or if he had acted rashly tonight, both she and the baby might have been done for. He could afford to lose everything, even his life, but what about her? She didn't dare to think deeply about it. Maybe once David did love her, those promises weren't lies. It's just that she got too greedy, wanted more. But what's so wrong with that? It's what she deserved, but it all went to someone else. She stood there with the door open for a long time, eyes increasingly hollow. Both her hands clamped over her mouth, wanting to cry out loud, but her hoarse voice couldn't form a single word. For the first time, she felt so powerless. The price of getting everything was losing her child. What's the point of living? The child wasn't supposed to be here. It was seeing how much David cared for someone else's kid that made her determined to have his baby. Being a new mom, she didn't know what to do. All she wanted was to protect her baby. But in the end, she not only failed but lost everything. The night deepened, and Candy seemed completely oblivious, sitting on the sofa in a daze, mumbling, "Baby, don't be scared. Mommy will come to be with you tomorrow, okay?" When David and his men came to get Candy, she had vanished. Nothing in the house was taken, even her phone lay on the sofa. He had people turn the place upside down, yet they couldn't find where she went. Just as he stepped out of the complex, someone shouted, "Come down, your family's waiting for you." Voices like this filled the air. David suddenly realized, was Candy causing trouble again? But when he reached the crowd, he was stunned. He hastily dialed the rescue number, barely managing to climb to the rooftop. "Young lady, you've got your whole life ahead. Don't do this. Come down for the baby's sake. We'll help you solve whatever problems you have." At that moment, Candy stood barefoot on the edge of the rooftop, in a white dress dancing. She looked just as pure as when David first met her. She recalled their first meeting at a shopping mall. Her boss had ordered her to strip and dance on stage to attract customers. She refused, getting screamed at. But she needed the money, so she gave in, though her eyes showed reluctance and her dance was stiff. That's when David appeared. Back then, he was already famous, with many fans appreciating his outstanding work. However, he needed to find a suitable anniversary gift for Carrie. Braving the risk of being recognized, he visited the mall late at night. In the end, he didn't find a gift, but he did save someone. Since then, Candy stuck by his side, becoming his little sidekick. She wanted to be his assistant, but he turned her down, saying he already had one. She offered to cook and clean, but he straightforwardly said he was married and his wife took care of everything. After thinking for a while, she shamelessly suggested being his mistress. David initially refused, not wanting to betray his wife, but he couldn't resist her constant allure. He let her into the company, so they could work together and spend time. Candy's idea then was simple. She just wanted to be near him. She never thought she'd stay 3 years. But how many 3 years do we have? Especially a girl just out of college. She cried, sang, and spun around on the rooftop, realizing how foolish she had been. Why did she fall for someone like him? In the end, she lost and became a laughingstock. Candy, come down. Stop this nonsense. She wasn't surprised David showed up. After all, he had said he'd take her for an abortion today. Since she couldn't bear it, better to go with her baby, so they can be together in heaven. Please just come down. We'll sort everything out. Seeing she wasn't moved, David softened his tone. I won't take you to the hospital. I'll let you go. Just come down, okay? Candy had seen through his tactics before. She didn't believe he'd really let her go, just a stall tactic. Once she was down, she'd still lose the baby and everything else. David, I begged you so much last night, but you wouldn't let me keep the baby. Why should I believe you now? Thinking of his cold attitude the night before filled her with despair. Everything was fine before, until Carrie showed up, and suddenly he didn't want her anymore. He was so heartless. She realized she had fallen for the wrong person. She truly regretted loving him and being trapped by him. Candy, just come down. David now realized the gravity of the situation, but he was helpless, waiting for the rescue team to figure something out. The rooftop was getting colder. Candy was wearing light clothes, and even though she was shivering, she wasn't planning to come down. I just want to feel the wind up here, she thought, a bitter smile forming on her lips. It was all her fault. She should have never gotten involved with a married man. She wrecked someone's home and paid the price. In this world, fortune and misfortune come hand in hand. If there's another life, she'd never fall for David again. A gust of wind blew by, and Candy suddenly laughed. To David, it seemed like she was saying goodbye. Before he could grab her hand, she had already fallen from the rooftop. Like a butterfly that lost its wings, she had lost all hope for life. Candy was rushed to the hospital with David right behind. He was too scared to speak, staring blankly at the surgery room. Maybe this was when the guilt finally hit him. When Carrie arrived in France, she bought a phone, got a new SIM card, and found a place to stay. She had planned everything before leaving, and besides the money David gave her, she had saved quite a bit over the years. All her money was in a different account, waiting for her to settle down so she could open a dessert shop. It was a promise to her sister, now finally possible. When living with David, all her needs were met, but she had nothing to do. After they got married, she couldn't stand it anymore and secretly opened a dessert shop. Unfortunately, it struggled due to competition, and she lost money. She thought David would be upset, but instead, he encouraged her to keep trying. As business dwindled and David got busier, she wondered if it was her fault and closed the shop, going back home. David got busier after his big break, working on deals, making movies, networking with directors. This path took him away from home, away from Carrie. Initially, she'd request outings, but after getting caught and trending online once, she regretted it and got scared. She couldn't believe how a simple day out turned into a fiasco, and David got criticized by fans and his manager, despite his marriage being public knowledge. Unsure of where she erred, or David, Carrie realized their past was gone. As his wife, she had to face the harsh truth. Afterward, even if David wanted to go out, she rarely did. She avoided film sets and rap parties. She wouldn't have known about his affair with Candy if Candy hadn't told her. How long would she not have known? A year? 2? Maybe a lifetime? In the past, she didn't understand her parents' relationship, thinking arguments meant they still loved each other. When they escalated to fighting and divorcing, she realized the first argument set them on an irreversible path. She cried, hurt, hated, regretted, and imagined countless possibilities, but reconciliation wasn't one of them. She knew she couldn't compromise or devalue herself, and not blaming David was her best support. Everyone makes mistakes, even David. So when she left, she forgave him for his wrongs, his pain, and his love for her. That night, she pondered a lot and eventually didn't sleep, wind blowing through her balcony. Once it all settled, she embarked on a new life, feeling slightly lost at starting over. Candy's jump caused a ruckus. Her sudden action meant no safety measures were set up on time. The baby didn't make it, and Candy became a vegetative state needing care. Out of guilt, David stayed in the hospital and also looked for Carrie. He couldn't believe she was gone without a trace, and even if true, he refused to accept it. He clung to hope of finding her. Eventually, a friend of his manager in France located Carrie. Yet before he could fly out, a paparazzo leaked footage of David's confrontation with Candy. Speculation erupted about his ruined image and infidelity allegations. Some claimed he should quit the industry, others saw no proof of cheating, and some urged patience for Carrie's explanation. Away across the ocean, Carrie wouldn't intervene, leaving David to handle it. The company advised damage control. Have someone pretend to be Carrie visiting him on a show to explain everything. Online trolls could believe what they wanted. They can't please everyone. Reluctantly, David followed the company's plan, easing the controversy. A month later, he landed in France. He had people to greet him, avoiding attention. If noticed, it would be dismissed as a private trip with no media allowed. Rushing to Carrie's dessert shop, he found it closed for vacation since 3 days ago. The small sign hanging at the entrance said the owner was out on business and would be back in about a week. It even had her current phone number. David didn't call right away. Instead, he saved her number, booked a hotel nearby, and waited patiently for Carrie. It had been too long since they last met, and he missed her a lot. He spent a few days wandering around France, but people recognized him, so he had to leave in a hurry and return to the hotel. Being a celebrity restricted him in many ways, even when it came to Carrie. He once thought working hard and providing for the family was everything. But even after having 2 families, it wasn't enough. He wasn't happy and felt like he lost a lot suddenly. Through chatting with locals, David learned more about Carrie. She was quick at picking up languages, couldn't bake yet tried anyway, almost blowing up the kitchen, and she loved smiling, always warm to those around her. All these traits he'd never seen back home. Waking from a bad dream, David felt disoriented. He got up to pour a glass of water, and then saw lights on in the pastry shop. It was his biggest surprise in ages. He thought he'd have to wait longer to see Carrie, but she was back sooner than expected. He spruced himself up, put on new clothes, and knocked on the pastry shop door late at night without telling anyone. The person inside seemed shocked to see him. David was also taken aback. Who was this guy? What was he doing here? Where was Carrie? Still, he politely explained why he was there and asked when Carrie would be back. Nathan didn't expect to run into David. He was just there to pick up a few things for Carrie. She had mentioned her past briefly to them. They knew some, but not much. Now her life as Clara was disconnected from that past. Without thinking, Nathan blurted out that he didn't know. Do you know where she is? I really want to see her. Even with Carrie's phone number, David didn't dare call. Afraid she might change it, and they'd lose touch again. Nathan, fighting the urge to land a punch on David, spoke coldly, Don't know anything, you should leave. David didn't budge. Out of options, Nathan couldn't do much beyond letting him linger like a bad omen. When Nathan finally gathered the items and was leaving, David stopped him again. Is there anything else? David knew this guy didn't want to talk to him, but he was worried about Carrie's safety and wanted to clarify things. Who are you to Carrie? There's no Carrie here, only Clara. I'm her boyfriend, all right? Nathan had never wanted to avoid a conversation this much. We've been together for a long time. I've got to close up now. Even after getting kicked out, a flicker of hope stayed with David. He remembered Carrie having a sister named Clara who had died young, leaving Carrie alone. In the dead of night, standing there, David felt both relief and regret. If he'd been around sooner, maybe Carrie wouldn't be with someone else. If he'd prioritized her, maybe she'd still be with him. But the only lead now was Nathan, and the only option was to wait. Carrie struggled to adapt to learning new skills again. She reached out for help running the bakery and learned baking from her late sister's partners. Surprisingly, Carrie hit it off with them. Molly, one partner, even sent her brother Nathan to assist Carrie. Upon meeting Nathan, Carrie found him mature for his age. Later on, she realized his maturity was just a facade. When she first opened the bakery, she invited Molly and Nathan over. But few customers came in weeks, so she sought out advice and eventually went out of town with Molly to learn more, leaving Nathan in charge. She didn't expect him to encounter David. After seeing the same person pop into the bakery a few times, she suspected he was scouting for David. Nonetheless, David still dropped everything to come find her. Carrie had moved past their history and treated David like any other customer, pouring him a cup of coffee. Carrie. David was at a loss. He was glad she remembered his love for coffee, but sad another man was now by her side. Carrie, I've missed you. Trying to mask the tremor in his voice, he couldn't stop the tears from welling up. I really miss you. Carrie didn't believe in fate. Once it's broken, you don't get it back. When she looked at David, all she felt was a detached calm. The rest was just fatigue. David, we're done. This was the truth, the inevitable ending. Whether he accepted it or not, they were over completely, irreversibly over. His sincerity was real, but so was the betrayal. What reason could he have to defend himself? But I don't want it to end. I've already torn up the divorce papers. Carrie felt an unexpected surge of irritation at his insistence. I'll send you another copy. Please sign it. At that moment, facing David, her patience had vanished. Especially when he wouldn't let go of her arm, her tone turned cold, and she honestly just wanted to end it all. David, please have some self-respect. We're really over. He didn't respond, which only made her head hurt. She never realized before that David could be so stubborn about relationships. Hey, Clara already told you it's over. Why are you still standing here? Nathan, who had been silently watching, suddenly stepped up, blocking Carrie. She was surprised by Nathan's intervention, but the shock quickly vanished. I'm not the Carrie I used to be. I have a new name, Clara. What's done is done. If there's nothing else, you should go back. Her response was firm, leaving David no room to speak, showing she had long moved on from their failed relationship and had no intention of ruminating on it again. Carrie, I can explain. David still clung to a shred of hope. Despite the rejection, his tone grew more determined. What happened before was my fault. But if you give me another chance, won't you forgive me? I promise I won't get tangled up with Candy again. Every word he said fell flat for Carrie, who felt nothing but more dislike. I told you before we got married, any betrayal, and I wouldn't forgive you. And you, knowing full well what I hate most, still did it, didn't you? Her words hit David hard, rendering him speechless. Carrie couldn't tolerate betrayal from someone she loved fervently. Carrie, I really know I was wrong. Please give me one last chance. I was wrong to ever get involved with Candy. I still love you. His emotional plea only made Carrie more disgusted. She had seen through David's heart by now. If he could love two people at once, how good could he truly be? Yet out of gratitude for him taking care of her all these years, Carrie decided to talk calmly. Whether he listened or not was his own business. Your business with Candy, whether before or now, has nothing to do with me. Whether you love me or love Candy, that's your choice, I can't bind you. But David, understand one thing. I wasn't joking when I said I'm now Clara. I'll never be the weak Carrie again. So treat me as Clara and don't come looking for me. Ignoring David, she grabbed Nathan's hand to go inside, but their path was blocked at the door. Neither going nor staying seemed feasible, and it irked her. Seeing Nathan holding her hand drained all warmth from David's eyes. "Carrie, please don't leave me, I'm begging you." Saying that, he suddenly dropped to his knees, his previous stubbornness crumbling, as if bereft of strength. Carrie closed her eyes briefly, as if resigning to fate, and said calmly, "David, I already gave you a chance." When she learned of his infidelity, she gave him 3 chances. Again and again, she told herself there was forgiveness as long as he loved her. Yet those chances were wasted, or rather, he never truly valued Carrie. Now he wanted another chance. Was there even a possibility? David didn't know. He could only gamble. He gambled that Carrie still held a glimmer of hope for him, that she wouldn't want to let go of their years together, that she would soften. But he was wrong. Carrie had already changed. She wasn't who she used to be. His actions put her in the spotlight again. It was nearing afternoon tea time, and plenty of people were coming and going nearby. Even without knowing the details, everyone loves a bit of gossip. Curiosity is only natural. What made it worse was David's refusal to leave, preventing the shop from opening, and giving her no chance to explain. Nathan noticed the growing crowd, and to prevent disruption, helped disperse them before returning to stand by her. Carrie gave him a grateful smile, but she turned cold again facing David. She couldn't bother with everything. At this moment, she just wanted David to let go back to America, and settle into his work. That was the best solution she could think of. Beyond that, she had no ideas. "David, since you want a chance, let me tell you, it's absolutely impossible. Perhaps you don't know, I'm a soft-hearted person. The first time Candy texted me about you and her, I kept count, giving you chances to make amends. The first time was at the award ceremony. You asked me to wait for you in the lounge, hoping I'd be the first thing you see when you came back. I knew the award might not be that important, but it was still a significant moment for you. Not wanting to embarrass you, I dressed up early and went to wait for you. And you." Carrie paused, feeling a chill to her bones. "You returned to the lounge much earlier than you said, yet when I called, you still lied to me. I stood outside the door and heard everything inside, enduring your flirtation for as long as it lasted." "How long?" "I don't know, but can you imagine how I felt?" David was at a loss for words. He never imagined that Carrie silently bore the brunt of his actions, paying the price for his mistakes in a place he had no knowledge of. When Carrie thought about those painful memories, she didn't yell or cry anymore. She didn't even get mad at him. Her eyes were blank and numb as she continued telling stories he'd never heard. "The second time it happened, it was in our new home. I remember after we bought the place, I worked with the designer to renovate it, bit by bit. You said once you retired from the spotlight, we'd move there and escape from the paparazzi. But what happened? You brought Candy into our home and did those things in our bed. Yeah, he did a lot of horrible things, killing her patients little by little until there was nothing left to save. At some point, the constant disappointments piled up into an insurmountable despair. David's sunken eyes were empty and dull, filled with numbness and hopelessness. Words cut like knives, each one slicing deeper until he felt raw and exposed. She didn't want to keep talking, because these 2 incidents were more than enough to see who he truly was. Get out. She wasn't sure how many times she'd told him that. The 3rd time was at the bridal shop, right? He was desperate, thinking he knew where their 3rd chance was lost, but he couldn't guess what he had done to make Carrie completely lose hope. "You heard everything, didn't you? I know you cared about that wedding dress. Was it because I gave it to Candy?" he asked unwillingly, trying to get a confirmation to prove he still knew Carrie inside and out despite everything. But he was wrong, very wrong. Carrie wouldn't lose faith in him just over a dress. "You're wrong, David." She lifted her eyelids slightly. Her once calm demeanor was replaced with disgust. "I've never complained over things. It's your attitude I've always cared about. But I must thank you. Though you knew how much I wanted to take wedding photos, you still tangled with Candy. That's when I realized I had stopped loving you." Her words landed like a loud slap across his face. David couldn't stand it any longer, collapsing to the ground, eyes wet and ashen. He tried to explain, to defend himself, but words failed him. The truth was he'd messed up, and now all excuses seemed pointless and empty. David sat there, his body trembling and silently sobbing. All his pain burst out. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Please, Carrie, believe me. And yet, what could have been different? According to his plan, since Carrie didn't want children, he'd have Candy have a baby for them instead. Once the child was born, he'd give Candy some money and let her go wherever she pleased. Then, he and Carrie would live a stable life with a happy, complete family. In a few years, when he retired, they'd travel the world and settle down who knows where. Sadly, none of it unfolded as he planned. It all shattered in one night. David, you always think you know everything. You assume I still loved you, that everyone would forgive you. But reality is, once broken, forever untrusted. Carrie didn't want to drag this on and went back to the room with Nathan. He watched their figures fade away, just like countless times before, and no amount of pleading could change that. But was his love for her a lie? Because of someone like Candy? Had they really thrown away all those years? Even in the toughest times, there was a smile on her face. When had that smile disappeared? David didn't get why she was so resolute. After thinking it over, he realized he'd messed up with Carrie, and even more so with Candy. But he'd already cut ties with Candy, and she'd paid the price, left in a vegetative state, possibly needing care for the rest of her life. Maybe it was because he didn't tell Carrie the rest of the story, leaving her with a misunderstanding. That had to be it, David thought, as his phone rang 3 times before he picked up. His manager's anxious voice pulled him back to reality. It was the last day in Paris, and whatever else was left unsaid, he still had to leave. He'd just gotten off the plane to find the exit blocked by fans. Worried about causing accidents, he waited in the VIP room for his assistant to come and get him out. The crowd outside didn't disperse right away, but eventually, his assistant snuck him out from another route and took him to safety. In the car, he finally checked his phone to see what had happened. To his shock, Candy's hospital had been discovered. Someone even posted her room number on social media, writing that she was now a vegetable. Fans started connecting the dots, digging up information linked to a previous incident. Thanks to David's fame, the story about his affair blew up, spiraling into a huge scandal. Initially, when a confronting video leaked, people thought it was just personal stuff and didn't pay much attention. Just gossip. But as everything unraveled, another clip emerged, showing David angrily grabbing Candy by the neck, demanding to know why she provoked Carrie. The video halted right before her potential suffocation. It seemed someone was pulling strings behind the scenes because the backlash was intense. People labeled David as fake. The entire internet practically crashed. His image as a good husband was demolished in an instant. Next, many stepped up claiming that David and his wife were divorced, and he only went to Paris to ask for her forgiveness. Video after video surfaced alongside photos of him with Candy. In just one night, everything hit social media, fueling everyone's outrage. I wasted so many years liking him, and spent so much money supporting him. Turns out he's that kind of guy. I can't stand a cheater. A sneaky cat will always end up eating a fish with a disease. Really, people like him should just get out of the entertainment industry, banned for good. Fans' harsh words brought a lot of criticism to David. He wasn't a good husband before, and now he's not someone worth rooting for. If he's really guilty, he'd rather face the punishment than leave Carrie. Even with Candy still in the hospital, fans' criticisms on her social media do no good. They can imagine how desperate Carrie must have been to leave, and just how badly David must have screwed up to drive her away. Overnight, the once megastar utterly collapsed. All his partners ditched him, demanding millions in penalty fees. Ads and movies he had worked on tanked, and directors who finally agreed to work with him blacklisted him over this. It's likely he didn't expect that all those mistakes he'd made with Carrie would come back to bite him now. That boomerang has landed squarely on David's back. The company felt ashamed to have him, and needed to find a way out. But since he did help them grow, they proposed an alternative. David probably didn't foresee that he'd be hit with massive compensation demands and face career-ending risks at such a young age. Even with some savings, they couldn't cover all the fines, leaving him no choice but to accept the company's offer. What caught him off guard was the company suggesting he reconcile with Carrie. This way, Fans might believe he didn't cheat or betray his wife, helping his image. While it wouldn't restore his past glory, it could save him from a lot of fines. The company, speaking in his favor, could keep him from ending up like this. Otherwise, they'd terminate his contract, putting more weight on his shoulders. But none of this concerned Carrie. She had moved on and wouldn't fall in the same place twice. David was hesitant to bother Carrie again, seeing her new life was going well, with someone else by her side. Even if he tried, it probably wouldn't go well. But the company pressured him, likely hoping to scrape more from him, and reached out to Carrie. After David left, Carrie and Nathan grew closer. He'd be with her at the bakery, even during her lonely, helpless nights. It was odd since Nathan needed care himself, yet he was the one supporting her. As they got to know each other better, Nathan realized his feelings for her. But Carrie couldn't allow herself to accept that. He and Molly had helped her too much already, wishing for more seemed selfish. Plus, she once let herself be consumed by love and got hurt. After many burnouts, she realized her mistakes. She couldn't afford to dive into another relationship, fearing more pain and misjudgment, even though she knew Nathan wouldn't hurt her. So when facing Nathan, she calmly told him she'd try to understand his feelings, but wouldn't promise anything more. She didn't know when or if she'd fully open up to him. Maybe one day she'd be ready, or maybe she wouldn't fall for him at all. But she wouldn't let that ruin their futures. Nathan, understanding, smiled and said he'd wait. A year, 2, 5. However long it took, as long as there was a sliver of hope, he'd hold on. When the company called, all she could think was, what does this have to do with me? After all those years, she knew David's number by heart. Even after deleting it, she could still message him from memory. She thought about confronting and complaining to him, but instead, all she said was, I won't help you again, David. On the other end, hesitating, he quickly replied after getting her message. Carrie, I'm not trying to get back together. I didn't mean to disturb you. The company made me do it. I feel stuck. If I don't comply, it'll just cause more trouble for me. So he'd sacrifice her for some peace of mind? His vague words seemed like chasing her again, ignoring that she already stepped back and let him and Candy be. Despite her best efforts, why was she always left with the bad ending? Carrie was so upset she couldn't eat or sleep. Nathan noticed her struggle. Such a sweet person, now boiling inside but silent. How much does she bear alone? Come on, let's go for a walk. How's that sound? She looked at him, and her eyes lit up hearing they'd go to the beach. Nathan didn't realize the beach meant so much to her. I remember loving the beach when I was little. I used to live at my grandma's place, right next to a river. My sister and I often caught fish there. Growing up, I moved in with my parents and that feeling is long gone. Nathan smiled, saying nothing, just taking off his coat to drape it over her shoulders. Carrie could feel her ears getting warm, and her hands started fidgeting a bit. There's so much amazing stuff out there to discover. Why get hung up on the present? Nathan's right. Her life is long. Why stress over now? It's already happened. Better to face it head on. They kept walking along the beach for ages, leaving footprints behind. She tried to fill the void by visiting the beach so many times as a grown-up. Yet this was the only time she truly forgot the world, making memories she'd never forget. Carrie couldn't hold out any longer after enduring those tough days. After sighing her way through yet another day, she still hadn't picked up the phone. Nathan knew she couldn't bring herself to cause a scene, even after splitting. So he took on that role quietly. Although she hadn't talked about her family matters since becoming friends, those who listened closely when they argued could guess David cheated and hoped to be forgiven. Carrie? David quickly answered. He didn't expect Carrie to still be talking to him, and you could hear a hint of happiness in his voice. Hello, this is Nathan. You. He still remembered that night, so meeting again he was ready for a showdown. I don't know the deal with you and Clara, but this seems pointless to me. David, you know this. From the moment you divorced, there was no more connection. So the fans' backlash isn't to do with Clara anymore. I don't know you, but I know Clara, and this has been troubling her for days. We're both men, so I won't beat around the bush. Just leave Clara alone, all right? David thought hard about what Nathan said. Yeah, he'd made mistakes. Making Carrie deal with them wasn't right. But now he was curious. Who was Nathan to be saying this? Carrie didn't wait for Nathan's answer. She jumped in with, "He's my boyfriend." At some point, Carrie appeared behind Nathan. Hearing what David asked, she stepped up to give Nathan some backing. "Worry about yourself. My affairs aren't your business." She hung up on him, face unreadable, but smiling pointedly at a startled Nathan. Afraid to admit it? From the very first time David showed up eyeing him distrustfully, she was curious. Why all the bad vibes when they just met? She'd thought about it ever since, but today, she finally got it sorted. Pretending to be my boyfriend should be a one-time thing. Why? Carrie didn't explain as she made her way upstairs. Maybe it was from Nathan standing up for her that her once cold heart started to, unseen, crack open a bit. Molly wanted new adventures, so she left her little brother behind. She claimed it was to look out for Carrie, but all three knew it was to let them get closer. "Nathan, remember, you've been a pain since you were little. If you don't take this shot, well, you'll get an earful next time I swing by." Nathan blushed and sneaked a peek at Carrie, catching her watching him. But all jokes aside, he had no plans to waste this chance. "All right, I get it. Now go, or you'll be late." Under a bit of pushing, Molly reluctantly got into the car. As she drove off, she poked her head out, encouraging him to do well and seal the deal. Only after the car was out of sight did he turn back to Carrie. She was blushing too, frozen in place but keeping a sneaky eye on him. "Let's head back." He finally broke the awkward silence, leading the way. It eased the tension. Carrie trailed behind with a hidden smile, taking a moment to check him out. Despite being so tall, at that moment, he seemed like a kid to her. Since she got back from studying, the shop had filled with stuff, mostly for crafting new treats. Once unpacked, there's nowhere for them, stuck in storage this whole time. Better get them out before they collect dust. After that call, David had stopped bothering her. Whatever he did, even at work, there was no sign of him. It was all she could have asked for. Her shop tidied up a bit. She opened the storage room door, and the sight inside blew her away. Back then, she didn't know she could be this lazy, letting the mess accumulate. Now dragging it all out was a daunting task. "I got this." Nathan popped up in old clothes, even wearing a newspaper hat. "I won't have you lifting everything. My sister won't let me hear the end of it." Carrie wanted to say she'd stick up for him, but realizing they weren't officially a thing, she held back. "Hand me the lighter boxes, so I can decide where they go." The store had that European flair, which she and her sister adored. Her sister wasn't there to tease away tears now, absent her subtle taunts. "Quit crying, silly girl." Nathan mused as he tried devising a way to bring the top box down. He looked back, seeing Carrie rubbing tears with dirted hands, warning they'd make her look like a mess. She abruptly stopped crying at his words, switching to chuckling, leaving Nathan puzzled. In just a moment, she could swing from tears to smiles. Every single move she made utterly charmed him, so much so he hardly dared imagining where future paths might lead them. "I'm all right." She tried to hide her intentions, and he understood her little tricks, so he didn't say much more, and kept busy moving things from the storage down outside for Carrie to clean and set up. Working together is always better than alone. Thinking about it, Nathan handled all the big items, which made it much easier for her, and was a big help. When they wrapped up, Carrie offered to have him stay for dinner. The thought of her cooking that notorious blackened eggplant made Nathan shiver. He quickly shook his head, not wanting to risk it. That stuff could land someone in the hospital with a bad stomach. No way he was trying it. After some back and forth, Nathan got the job of cooking. "Let me do it. I actually took some lessons," he bragged. Seeing the pride on his face, Carrie couldn't help but giggle. When she caught his gaze, her heart skipped a beat, and she turned away shyly. "I should go shower first," she said, grabbing some clothes and heading upstairs without looking back, trusting Nathan to handle the cooking. When she returned, the table was filled with dishes that left her amazed. Before, when three of them lived together, it was always Molly who cooked. It turned out, Nathan had his own hidden talents. She was genuinely surprised. Nathan waited for her to take some photos before he began introducing each dish. From veggies to meats, and even a sweet dessert, everything was just to her taste, even if it weren't her absolute favorites. "How come I never knew you could cook?" Carrie asked, resting her chin on her arm as she leaned on the table, blinking at him with cheeks as red as a doll's. He was a bit flustered under her gaze, and his eyes darted around. He couldn't very well say he learned just to cook for her with Molly's help. Otherwise, he'd never hear the end of it. Surprised? I got a lot of skills like this. You'll have to stick around to find out, he chuckled. But normally, I keep the cooking thing to myself, he added. Of course, except for her. He didn't say that last part out loud, afraid she'd misunderstand. After spending so much time together, he understood her feelings. If she wasn't up for it, he'd take it slow, find another way to stay around. Carrie watched him with a smile, knowing everything. If it weren't for him and his sister, she might have been lonely forever. Somehow, after spending all this time together, she felt like she had changed. Late at night, Carrie lay in bed, unable to sleep. She browsed through her phone and saw David trending again. Since his scandal broke, people had lost interest in his films, ads, and endorsements. Who'd trust someone who cheated on his wife? Who knew if he could be trusted elsewhere? Carrie clicked on the top trending topic. It was David announcing his withdrawal from the industry. Apparently, he struck a deal with his company to forfeit everything and promised to make amends. He even took responsibility for Candy's tragic incident, vowing to take care of things, asking for peace if they met in person. Comments varied. Some thought he deserved jail. Others saw his withdrawal as enough. He did have loyal fans from his early days who couldn't believe their idol was a bad guy. Back then, Carrie was by his side, seeing firsthand his rise to fame. But fame brings trouble, and after his infidelity scandal, sticking around wasn't viable. Whether he left by choice or was blacklisted, he was still young enough to find work elsewhere. Reading the trending topics didn't bring Carrie satisfaction, just the usual calm. Between strangers, maybe all that was left was sympathy. She glanced at other trending stories, read a bit of gossip, then switched off her phone and closed her eyes. In the darkness, she saw David holding flowers, joking about their past. As day broke, he waved goodbye with a smile, ending their story as if it were all a dream. The next morning, despite feeling sluggish, Carrie dragged herself downstairs to find someone bustling in the kitchen. "Good morning," Nathan called from the kitchen, carrying breakfast to the table. He grinned at her as he set each dish down before sitting to wait for her to wash up. Carrie quickly freshened up, sat down, and was ready to dig in. Suddenly, 2 movie tickets, or rather, a new hot pot theater invite, appeared before her. Nathan saw her repeatedly checking the tickets and wondered if there was something secret on them. What had her so excited? She put the ticket down and pointed to a note. "Outdated equipment, maybe only hot pot?" She read aloud. Nathan watched her carefully for any reaction. Hearing her, she suddenly looked right at him, faces so close, accidentally brushing cheeks. Both blushed instantly. She hastily turned away, awkwardly asking, "There won't be a movie?" Nathan coughed, trying to regain his composure. "We can give it a shot. There might be a surprise in store." She nodded quickly, eager to agree, then went back to calmly finishing breakfast like nothing happened. The movie started in the afternoon, and when Carrie woke from her nap, it was nearly time. Nathan was waiting downstairs. They hurriedly prepared and rode their bikes leisurely to the theater. This hot pot theater just opened with only 3 available viewing rooms. They were placed in a small room, crowded but not noisy, filled with the aroma of hot pot. Since going abroad, Carrie hadn't had such authentic hot pot in ages. Feeling a bit excited, she bought a bottle of wine, planning to get tipsy with Nathan. But she didn't really know her own drinking limits. After just 1 glass, she was already tipsy and started getting a little too flirty. Even though Nathan is pretty tolerant, he couldn't handle her sweetly smiling at every guy she saw, asking for their contact info. So, he carried Carrie on his back heading home. At first, she was squirming all over the place, but soon she settled down, quietly crying on his shoulder. Even as she cried, she called him a bad guy for not making a move all this time. Nathan felt stuck. The only reason he hadn't made a move was because he feared rejection, thinking they might not even end up as friends. He gently kept reassuring her, saying he wasn't doing it on purpose. He was just afraid she wouldn't feel the same way. He promised that when the right moment came, he'd make his move. After talking for what seemed like forever, he noticed Carrie had fallen asleep, drooling on his collar, missing everything he said. Nathan just smiled, knowing he had to get her home. At least she said it first, and now he knew how he felt. It wasn't too late for anything. Things were just getting started. When Carrie woke up the next morning, her head was pounding, and her body ached. She turned her head to see Nathan lying beside her, with just a corner of the blanket covering him, looking kind of pitiful. She found it hard to believe they squished together on that small bed all night. As she shifted, Nathan suddenly opened his eyes and pulled her close. She thought about pulling away, but flashes of the night before turned her cheeks red. She couldn't quite decide whether to stay put or not, so she awkwardly lay there in his arms. "I didn't do anything crazy last night, did I?" she cautiously asked, her eyes full of curiosity and a bit of self-reflection. "If I did, you've got to tell me. I'll take responsibility." Nathan found her serious expression both amusing and endearing, and couldn't help but tease her. "You said you really like me and want to be with me." She was stunned. Was she really that bold? But then she heard him chuckling above her, and she playfully punched him, asking why he was laughing. Nathan didn't reply much, just got out of bed to make breakfast. She trailed behind him like a little shadow, repeatedly asking if she really said anything, urging him to fess up if she did. From that day on, their relationship changed, growing closer. They left behind the distance and politeness that once defined them. They could share anything openly now, facing problems together. This was what Carrie had wanted for so long. After facing many experiences with Nathan, she realized a lot about herself and found courage to face her feelings. So one night, she snuck in a drink and, while Nathan was unaware, kissed him. "Why haven't you confessed to me yet? Or do I have to do it?" He didn't know what to say, but his wildly beating heart gave him away. "Clara, will you?" She answered enthusiastically, "I will." Her confident response gave him the courage he needed. So, he leaned in to deepen the kiss, gentle and earnest. Months later, they shut down their dessert shop to prepare for a round-the-world trip. Along the way, there was laughter, playful bickering, and a calm happiness. A long time ago, Carrie was confused and hesitant, growing amidst danger. But once she caught a piece of sunlight and illuminated her path in the darkness, she saw that the road to happiness was simple and beautiful. They wrote their names in the sand on the beach, letting the waves wash over them. Their love was something to be savored. Many years went by, and with their hair white as snow, they had weathered countless storms, but still held hands as they did at the start. The end.